Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So please forgive my Sanskrit skills, but you are free to help me out. Text 17. So we are today reading from Canto 5, Chapter 5, Text 17 and 18. Text 17. Kashtam swayam tad abhigyano vipaschid. This is, you don't have, okay, sorry, you have only 18. I will just read then translation to the verse 17, and then we can read together Sanskrit of the text of 18. So translation for the text 17 is, if someone is ignorant and addicted to the path of samsara, how can one who is actually learned, merciful, and advanced in spiritual knowledge engage him in fruitive activity and thus further entangle him in material existence? If a blind man is walking down the wrong path, how can a gentleman allow him to continue on his way to danger? How can he approve this method? No wise or kind man can allow this. So text 18. Guru na sasyat swajano na sasyat. Pita na sasyat janani na sasyat. Daivam na tatsyan na patischa sasasyan. Namo chayedya samupeta mrityum. Okay, anyone like to repeat this? Guru na satya samyo na satya. Pita na satya janani na satya. Pita na satya janani satya. Daivam na tatsya na patischa satya. Daivam na tatsya na patischa satya. Namo chayedya samupeta mrityum. Namo chayedya samupeta mrityum.
Gururna sasyat svajano na sasyat.
Gururna sasyat svajano na sasyat.
Pitana sasyat janani na sasyat.
Pitana sasyat janani na sasyat.
Daivam na tatsyan na patischa sasyan.
Daivam na tatsyan na patischa sasyan.
Namo chayetyak samupeta mrityum.
Namo chayetya samupeta mrityum. Any from Vaishnavis? Guru na sasyat svajano na sasyat. Pita na sasyat janani sasyat. Daivam na tatsya na patischa sasya. Namo chayetya samupeta mrityum. Okay. Oh, please go ahead.
Guru na sasyat svajano na sasyat.
Guru na sasyat svajano na sasyat.
Pita na sasyat janani na sasyat.
Pita na sasyat janani na sasyat.
Daivam na tatsyan na patischa sasyan.
Daivam na tatsya na patischa sasya.
Namo chayedya samupeta mrityum.
Namo chayedya samupeta mrityum. Okay. Please repeat word after word translation. So Guru, a spiritual master. Na, not. Sa, he. Syat, should become. Svajana,
Svajana,
a relative. Na, not. Sa, such a person. Syat, should become. Pita, a father. Na, not. Sa, he. Syat, should become. Jnani, a mother. Na, not. Sa, she. Syat, should become. Daivam, a worshipable deity. Na, not. Tat, that. Syat, should become. Na, not. Pati, a husband. Cha, also. Sa, he. Syat, should become. Na, not. Mochayet, can deliver. Ya, who. Samupeta mrityum, one who is on the path of repeated birth and death. Translation by A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. One who cannot deliver his dependents from the path of repeated birth and death should never become a spiritual master, a father, a husband, mother, or a worshipable demigod. Just read invocation. Om Jnana Timirandasya Jnanjana Shalakaya Chakshran Vilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manabhishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Svapadantikam Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Pashta Bhutale Shrimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Iti Namine Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pracharini Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshatayini He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandho Jagatpate Gopisha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadara Shivasati Gaura Bhakta-vrinda Vanchakalpa Tarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhyeva Cha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namo Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Okay, so let me read again translation, and then I will read the purport. So, one who cannot deliver his dependents from the path of repeated birth and death should never become a spiritual master, a father, a husband, a mother, or a worshipable demigod. So in the commentary, in the purport, Srila Prabhupada says, there are many spiritual masters, but Rishabhadev advises that one should not become a spiritual master if he is unable to save his disciple from the path of birth and death. Unless one is a pure devotee of Krishna, he cannot save himself from the path of repeated birth and death. Tyaktva deam punar janma naiti mam eti sarjona. So this is from Bhagavad Gita 4:9. One cannot stop birth and death only by returning home back to Godhead. No, one can stop birth and death only by returning back home, back to Godhead. However, one who can go back to Godhead unless he understands, how can one go back to Godhead unless he understands the Supreme Lord in truth? So, Janma karma chu me divyam evam yo veti tatataha. Again from Bhagavad Gita 4:9. We have many instances in history illustrating Rishabhadev's instructions. Shukracharya was rejected by Bali Maharaj due to his inability to save Bali Maharaj from the path of repeated birth and death. Shukracharya was not a pure devotee. He was more or less inclined to fruitive activity, and he objected when Bali Maharaj promised to give everything to Lord Vishnu. Actually, one is supposed to give everything to Lord, because everything belongs to the Lord. Consequently, the Supreme Lord advises in Bhagavad Gita, Yad karosi yad ashnasi, yad juhosi dadashi yad tapasyasi. Please, if you know, much better. And translation? You can read. Okay. O son of Kunti, all that you do, all that you eat, all that you offer and give away, as well as all austerities that you may perform, should be done as offering unto me. This is bhakti. Unless one is devoted, he cannot give everything to Supreme Lord. Unless one can do so, he cannot become a spiritual master, husband, father, or mother. Similarly, the wives of the Brahmanas who were performing sacrifices gave up their relatives just to satisfy Krishna. This is an example of wife rejecting a husband who cannot deliver her from the impending dangers of birth and death. Similarly, Prahlad Maharaj rejected his father, and Bharata Maharaj, he rejected his mother. Janani na sa syat. The word Daivam indicates a demigod or one superior demigod or one who accepts worship for a dependent. Ordinarily, the spiritual master, husband, father, mother, or superior relative accepts worship from an inferior relative, but here Rishabhadev forbids this. First, the father, spiritual master, or husband must be able to release the dependent from the repeated birth and death. If he cannot do this, he plunges himself into the ocean of reproachment for his unlawful activities. Everyone should be very responsible and take charge of his dependents, just as a spiritual master takes charge of his disciple, or a father takes charge of his son. All these responsibilities cannot be discharged honestly unless one can save the dependent from repeated birth and death. So, teachings of... can you hear me? Okay. Okay, is it better like this, I hope? Teachings of Lord Rishabhadev are imparted by him to his sons, and they were actually repeatedly quoted by Srila Prabhupada when he circled the globe and he was preaching Krishna consciousness to everyone. This specific verse, I believe, is quoted more than 100 times in various occasions, various lectures or morning walks. But altogether, I would say some 5 or 6 verses from these teachings were quoted individually more than 200, 300 times. So you can see how important this is. So Prabhupada always had this tremendous urgency and also incredible potency when he was delivering these essential truths to quite diverse audiences around the globe, right? So he encountered really people from all walks of life. And at one point when he was in London, one reporter asked him, "Why had you come here?" And Prabhupada didn't lose a heartbeat. He just said immediately, "Because I'm here to teach you to," how he put it, "to teach you what you have forgotten." He immediately replied, right? So we need to hear these essential truths over and over again and again. And if we focus on them, then there is every chance that they can transform our life. That's the idea behind it, right? Prabhupada taught us how association is absolutely essential. Association with whom? With devotees, right? Why? Any thoughts? Yeah, please.
Because bhakti can only come from bhakti, so we can only get
Wonderful. Right. Wonderful. I have a little bit simpler answer, but wonderful explanation. Because devotees ultimately, they inspire us and they support our spiritual life, right? They encourage us to achieve spiritual perfection. But yes, bhakti comes from bhakti, so unless we associate with devotees who have bhakti, no chance of us having bhakti on our own, right? Prabhupada also warned us about different pitfalls that we will encounter on a spiritual life, on this spiritual journey. And the most formidable obstacle that we will encounter is attraction for the opposite gender. So this is the biggest pitfall of all, right? And but ultimately, he taught us that the goal of life is to develop pure Krishna consciousness. And then when we develop pure Krishna consciousness, then what? What comes next? Any thoughts?
Maybe we want to share it with others.
Share it with others. That's it. Beautifully said. That's what we need to do, right? First, we need to develop Krishna consciousness, and then we can share it with others. Not the other way around. So we should help as many others to do the same. Or in other words, we should first save ourselves and then save others. In this verse 5.5.18, actually Lord Rishabhadev speaks about responsibility, specifically for one who takes position of authority. So, and then, like I said, there are some verses, namely verses 1, 2, 4, and 5, if you are interested, that were quoted from this chapter, that were quoted more than 200, 300 times, and this one included. So, what are these instructions from Lord Rishabhadev? First is to properly utilize this rare human life form, to find spiritual happiness, not material happiness. Then, something we already mentioned, great value of spiritual association. It is essential for our spiritual progress to have spiritual association. Then material degradation happens through sense gratification. I think we all have these realizations. Then sexual attraction is the basis of material life. Then we should strive to terminate this unnatural process of transmigrating from one body to next. We should put stop on it. We should not accept it, right? We should say, okay, I had enough, thank you. I would like to go back home, back to you, Krishna, right? So ultimately, we need to develop certain qualities of character required for this spiritual perfection. And then we should cultivate bhakti through various devotional services. And then in connection to today's verses, 17 and 18, Lord Rishabhadev was actually preparing his sons for ruling. And he was explaining to them responsibility of a leader, what it means to be a true leader. And then finally, he gave also instruction to his sons, they should always follow and respect brahmanas. That's also very important. So one might think, okay, I mean, Lord Rishabhadev, that he is Krishna, I mean, and his sons are sons directly from Krishna. Do they really need to have all these instructions? And the answer is no. They really didn't need to be taught about these instructions. They already were quite versed in them. But this is all meant for us. The same way as Krishna is giving instructions to Arjuna, but ultimately that's all meant for us, right? And in the same way as we have Srimad Bhagavatam, right? Because Srimad Bhagavatam is compiled as a guidance to conditioned souls, again, to help us, right? To help us, everyone who is willing to take focus and to listen. So every single living entity in this material world, as you know, is conditioned by this material nature. And Srila Prabhupada puts it very nicely. He says that this creation is, and especially this human body, is a chance to get rid of this material entanglement. And this chance is open by acting for the satisfaction of Vishnu or Krishna. So chance is there, but you need to take it. You need to take it by rendering some voluntary sacrifice in which you will offer to Krishna as devotional service. So in whatever varna or whatever ashram you are situated, you should be responsible. That's the general idea. This is what we hear from these teachings, from this verse. Otherwise, if we don't do that, if we are not responsible, then what's the difference between this human life form and animal life, right? So human life form means that we are responsible. A responsible person is no better than animal. I think we heard that many times from Srila Prabhupada. So human life is very valuable and very, very rare. I heard some statements on how rare it is, but I will keep that for some other day. And we should not waste it, right? So it's incredibly rare. But you know what's even more rare than human life form? Associating with devotees, right? And with Prabhupada through his teachings and all the saints in our tradition, right? So it's incredibly rare. We are so fortunate to have access to this. So if we are so fortunate, we should take that very seriously and very responsibly. So human life form is life of responsibility, and ultimately it's meant for God realization. That's the whole purpose of this form. And the highest responsibility of soul in human body is to actually serve Krishna and go back to home, back to Godhead. That's the highest responsibility. First, develop Krishna consciousness, right? And then we can talk about helping others. So that's our supreme objective, to serve Krishna and go back home to Him. And in order to achieve that, Lord Rishabhadev is instructing that one needs to perform certain austerities. So austerity should be performed voluntarily. That's also very important, right? So nobody is forcing us. It should be voluntarily, and it should be for the pleasure of Krishna. That's what it means to do austerity, right? So one who voluntarily restrains his senses for pleasing Krishna, one who restrains his senses to perform what all of you are anyhow doing, devotional service, that person is doing austerities. But we should also be humble. Do you know what how Srila Prabhupada defined being humble? Have you heard him say? Yes, please.
I think he gave different
Absolutely.
He said, preach boldly for Krishna, and you become.
Preach boldly for Krishna. Wonderful. Okay. Yes, please.
When one is convinced that Krishna is his only protector.
My hearing is so bad.
When one is convinced that Krishna is the only protector.
That's the one I was aiming for. But this one is also beautiful, but that's exactly it. So when you are 100% completely convinced that only Krishna's mercy can save you, nothing else. Nothing else exists. So you need to be you need to have that conviction. When you have that, then you're humble. I never think about humble that way, but this really opened my mind and my eyes. So if you are convinced like that, then you're humble. These instructions, this process is open for everyone. but we need to take it seriously. In Chaitanya Charitamrita, Adi Lila, 941, Lord Chaitanya says, Janma Jara Janma Shatraka Kari. First of all, make yourself perfect and then preach. This was instruction to all inhabitants of India, but it's also meant for every other human form. First, make yourself perfect and then you preach. In other words, Prabhupada also puts it very, very nicely. Don't become nonsense and then become teacher, right? So we should not become nonsense and then teach nonsense to others. So these teachings of Lord Rishabhadev are meant for all of us, and if you still don't believe me, then listen to the verse that will come in the next chapter, text 16. Prabhupada says that the teachings of Lord Rishabhadev are for people of all yugas, Satya, Treta, Dvapara, and especially for Kali Yuga. These instructions are so powerful that even in this age of Kali, one can attain perfection simply by explaining the instructions, following the footsteps of the acharyas, or listening to the instructions with great attention. So we can attain perfection just by doing this. If one does so, one can attain the platform of pure devotional service to Lord Vasudeva. The pastimes of Supreme Personality of Godhead and his devotees are recorded in the Srimad Bhagavatam, so that those who recite these pastimes and listen to them will become purified. Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya. This is from Srimad Bhagavatam 1:2-18. As a matter of principle, devotees should read, speak, and hear Srimad Bhagavatam persistently, 24 hours daily, if possible. So, from Bhagavad Gita, we also learned that knowledge is like a sword. If you have any kind of doubts, if you cultivate knowledge, this sword can cut through that doubts, right, and release you from these doubts. But if you don't proceed with this knowledge, with this cultivation, this accumulation or acquisition of knowledge, if you don't proceed with that very carefully, this same sword can create havoc in your spiritual life. Let me explain why. Because, you see, with knowledge comes, knowledge is considered to be power, right? And then with great power comes great responsibility. Can you imagine then how greatly responsible we are if we cultivate perfect knowledge that comes directly from God, from Krishna? It must be the most responsible thing we need to do, right? If we cultivate that. So if one neglects this and doesn't cultivate proper devotional attitude, so we need to also think about our attitude. If we don't have this devotional attitude, then we can misuse that sword, right? So that's exactly why all the previous saints in our tradition, all the previous acharyas that we are trying to follow, Srila Prabhupada being here next to us, they all emphasize character building as essential thing, right? So it's always, we need to develop our character by following the footsteps of previous acharyas. So that's the, we need to responsibly take this gift of wise instructions from previous saints by developing our character. So do you remember what Prabhupada said, what we said, who is humble?
To always be conscious that Krishna is the only protector.
Exactly. So knowledge without humility can cause one to falsely inflate, to become puffed up, right, in his own spiritual status. So, and then what happens? If we are puffed up, then our spiritual progress, our internal growth is checked, it's stopped, or it's slowed down, right? And so if this happens, it's hard to detect that but then you are highly exposed to the attacks of illusion, of Maya, right? If you go that way. So we need to always keep that in check, that we have this humility that we cultivate along with knowledge. Is this relatable to you? It's highly relatable to me, so I'm sharing that. Then what happens if we have knowledge without compassion? Any thoughts? So you cultivate, yeah, please.
You use it for yourself, and you get selfish.
And?
And you get selfish, you don't share it.
Exactly.
And then actually you can also not gain more and more.
Right, so it's all about you and nobody else, right? It's very, you said it right, you're more selfish, but ultimately it ruins all your relationships because it changes your vision. You start to become, you're not sensible to anyone else's suffering, and then this changes your vision of others. You think you're superior to them, and then it ruins all your relationship with other people in human life form, right? And then if you don't also have deep sense of selflessness when we share this knowledge to others, when we share what we have received by the mercy in the same way, selflessly, then we become selfish, and there is all chance that we exploit or manipulate others with this knowledge. I think we also seen that a lot in history, right? And again, I can testify from my personal experience when I got some spiritual knowledge, and then all of a sudden I feel, I'm superior to somebody else who doesn't know this, and then I'm now teaching him all puffed up, and it backfires immediately. But on a much greater scale, you have also in past Hitler reading Bhagavad Gita and trying to speculate on that knowledge, right? So there is all danger of misusing that. You see, leader is ascertained or judged by not how much he knows, but who he is. That's the instruction that we hear here, right? So it's not, of course it's important that you know things, but it's who you are, as what you're made of, so to speak. And then again, we have knowledge without practical application. So all this knowledge that we are learning, that we are acquiring, if we are not applying that, ultimately leads us to deserts of dry speculation. And you are practically robbed of this wonderful spiritual experience you can have in devotional service, which comes through only when you are walking your talk, right? You heard that a lot. You heard that phrase, walk your talk, right? It's being genuine. It's doing exactly what you are preaching, right? Prabhupada, again, being perfect example for that. So, ultimately, none other than Krishna stresses that one who is actually in knowledge gives their heart and soul in spirit of selfless service. So we should not simply read the scriptures in scholarly or academic way. We must understand that these scriptures are calling us to action. There needs to be some kind of action that comes out of what we are cultivating from these scriptures, right? And this action is devotional service. And then Swami Prabhupada, he repeatedly stressed that real education is character development. But I found something very beautiful. Let me share this with you. His name reminds us of the balance we have to strike. So A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. AC stands for what it means. So it means one who is fearless, having taken shelter of the lotus feet of Krishna, or Lord. What does it mean, Bhaktivedanta? Whatever comes to your mind.
Having attained the final knowledge of Vedanta, which is Bhakti.
Perfect, perfect. So knowledge, in other words, knowledge with devotion. That's what we try to do, right? Knowledge with devotion. And that's exactly the winning formula that we are striving for. And what does it mean, Prabhupada? 2 words, Prabhu, Pada.
I think many people are situated on his lotus feet.
Exactly, spot on. So all the Prabhus, masters, are sitting at his lotus feet. So Prabhupada is taking shelter of lotus feet of Lord Krishna, and all the other Prabhus are taking shelter of his lotus feet. So there you have it, disciplic succession, right? So it's so beautifully said, right? Okay, so we still have some minutes left. If you don't mind, because we read from, I gave you example what Prabhupada says, let me repeat it, that these instructions are so powerful that even in this age of Kali, one can attain perfection simply by explaining the instructions. I'm not trying to explain them, I'm just trying to repeat what Srila Prabhupada said. And then, if we listen to these instructions with great attention, we can get to the platform of pure devotional service of Lord Vasudeva. So, because of that, let me just quickly go through these 5 verses and read them to you. So please be attentive. Lord Rishabhadev told his sons, "My dear boys, all of the living entities who have accepted material bodies in this world, one who has been awarded this human form should not work hard day and night simply for sense gratification, which is available even for dogs and hogs that eat stool. One should engage in penance and austerity to train the divine position, to attain the divine position of devotional service. By such activity, one's heart is purified, and when one attains this position, he attains eternal blissful life, which is transcendental to the material happiness and which continues forever." Verse 2, one can attain the path of liberation from material bondage only by rendering service to highly advanced spiritual personalities. These personalities are impersonalists and devotees. Whether one wants to merge into Lord's existence or wants to associate with the personality of Godhead, one should render service to the Mahatmas. For those who are not interested in such activities, who associate with people fond of women and sex, the path to hell is wide open. The Mahatmas are equipoised. They do not see any difference between the living entity, one living entity, and another. They are very peaceful and fully engaged in devotional service. They are devoid of anger, and they work for the benefit of everyone. They do not behave in any abominable way. Such people are known as Mahatmas. Then verse 4. When a person considers sense gratification the aim of life, he certainly becomes mad after materialistic living and engages in all kinds of sinful activity. He does not know that due to his past misdeeds, he has already received a body which, although temporary, is cause of his misery. Actually, the living entity should not have taken on material body, but he has been awarded the material body for sense gratification. Therefore, I think it not befitting an intelligent man to involve himself again in activities of sense gratification by which he perpetually gets material bodies one after another. Verse 8, the attraction between male and female is the basic principle of material existence. on the basis of this misconception, which ties together the hearts of the male and female, one becomes attracted to his body, home, property, children, relatives, and wealth. In this way, one increases life's illusions and thinks in terms of I and mine. And then today's verse, one who cannot deliver his dependence. And today's verse, one who cannot deliver his dependence from the path of repeated birth and death should never become a spiritual master, father, husband, mother, or a worshipable demigod. Maybe as a last thing I wanted to say, before I give you some time for questions or comments, I also would like to say something I discovered in the lecture from Srila Prabhupada 1976 in March, when Prabhupada was also talking about discipline, because this is also essential part of our instructions, right? And he said that disciple means discipline. And then the word discipline comes from disciple, or disciple comes from discipline. So unless there is discipline, there is no question of disciple. And then he said that in Sanskrit, discipline is called sisya. I hope I'm pronouncing this right. And this comes from the root word of sas dhatu. Sas means ruling. From this, we have another word, sasana, which means government. So, sas is also root word for another Sanskrit word you're quite familiar with, shastra, which means scripture and weapon, right? So, sisya, discipline, comes from sas dhatu, which means ruling under the discipline, and it is said that obedience, so ruling under the discipline, very interesting, right? So we need to willingly accept rule, right? But we need to be disciplined. And it is said, Prabhupada says this, it is said that obedience is the first law of discipline. So unless there is obedience, there cannot be any discipline. And unless there is discipline, there is no question of disciple. Disciple means one who follows the discipline. Ultimately, accepting spiritual master means voluntarily accepting someone to rule you. And then Prabhupada said, I have no power to rule over you unless you voluntarily surrender. So he gave us all the instructions there, wonderfully, right? And then meditating on all this that I was discovering as I was trying to prepare for this class, I also came across something that Bhakti Trita Swami said. I found it very beautiful and inspiring. And he said, suppose you have an orange and you squeeze that orange, what comes out? Many of you heard this, right? I mean, and it's logical. It's orange juice, right? So if in this analogy, if we replace orange with you, somebody squeezes you, chastises you, or puts you under a lot of pressure, insults you, what comes out? Whatever is inside, right? We should be very careful what we put inside. And ultimately, we should strive to develop this character with these instructions, what we heard from Lord Rishabhadev about how to attain spiritual perfection. And then everything that will be inside will be only love. Somebody squeezes you, love comes out. And that's a whole different level of how you can live your life then, right? So I'll leave you with that. Do you have any questions or comments? Emphasis on comments. Please.
Thank you. Sorry. Thank you so much for your inspiring lecture. It was very nice. You were mentioning several times that we should become perfect first before we preach. And in one sense, of course, we can only teach what we have. We cannot teach what we don't have, and it's so important that we walk the talk. But then, on the other hand, for example, Keshe Maharaj emphasizes so much on wisdom that breathes. You breathe in and you breathe out. And this wisdom is like the air that you take and you give also. And that we learn so much in sharing it with others, actually. So, what would you comment on that? Is it just like we spend the first part of the day to breathe in and then to breathe out in that sense to make your day perfect? In that sense that you learn first and then preach? Or is it really also a phase of life that you are dedicating for learning and then you focusing on preaching? Or what would you say?
I don't know if I will answer this question properly, but if you feel again inclined, just jump in. One thing that I find very inspiring is actually the meaning of Katha. So it's not I'm lecturing you, I'm sharing something confidentially with you. I'm sharing what was being shared with me. So in that kind of mood, we are encouraging ourselves, we are taking care of our spiritual lives, we are inspiring others. But I'm not saying a single word here that I wrote that I didn't take from Srila Prabhupada. That's the general idea. This is how I understand it. So I don't know if this answers your question, but this is what I picked up as a mood of not trying to invent something new, just make it more relatable to the context of what are my experiences through the life and audience before me, right? But ultimately the same essence. Does that answer your question, or no? Yeah, maybe I didn't hear you properly because, yeah, please.
As I understood what you just said, I think you could say that by repeating the perfect words of the perfect devotee, then you're also perfect, and in this way you can preach.
Okay, yes.
I mean,
okay.
just if I maybe...
Then I didn't understand you properly, as my hearing is not so good. Sorry about that.
I just wanted to summarize what you said, how I understood what you said now. Was
okay.
that correct? Like,
yes, but I'm not sure if I answered the question. Okay. I have another comment on that that just came to my mind, and it's, you know what Srila Prabhupada said, who is pure devotee? Who is pure devotee?
all his disciples.
All his disciples. Right? Isn't that beautiful? So we are all supposed to be teachers, right? But how do you teach? We went through all these instructions today, right? You can easily become puffed up. You can easily have this knowledge without compassion, without selflessness, and you can create all kinds of havoc with that, right? So we need to cultivate that, and we need to cultivate this attitude of devotional service, having association of devotees. Without that, again, we are just speculating, and then we are just creating some concoction that is not what Srila Prabhupada taught us, right? So, any other? Yeah, please.
I think you made a beautiful point that the attitude of the preacher is very important, right? I think Srila Prabhupada makes a comment in the Nectar of Devotion that a preacher should always feel himself like a beginner in Krishna consciousness.
Preacher should always?
A preacher should always feel like a beginner,
Aha.
like that's kind of the attitude of a preacher, just repeating the words of the acharyas. And of course, we could also on the other side we could also say, well, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, he spent 9 years just chanting Hare Krishna before he did any preaching. So everyone first chanting 9 years. And not only chanting, but he chanted the whole day. So that, and then also there's a statement that the true Goshtyanandi is a Bhajananandi. That means the true preacher is one who has done bhajan himself, because otherwise, what's the point of your preaching? So these statements are there. Of course, that's there. But then, as you said, even if we may not have yet so much realization, we still can join Mahaprabhu's Sankirtan mission by simply repeating the words of the great acharyas. And in this way, we are part of the mission. We are also preaching and we're learning. And of course, we're also growing in that process. But then, that's why I like your answer. But then the attitude, so this should always be a humble attitude, in a sense, understanding that I'm not an acharya, because I have not chanted 9 years, billions of names, but I'm kind of serving my spiritual master. And then preaching becomes very powerful and wonderful also. And of course, Prabhupada very much encouraged preaching, because otherwise how is Mahaprabhu's mission kind of manifesting, right? That was the whole point of Mahaprabhu sharing Krishna consciousness. Yeah.
Thank you for that.
Prabhu, I was just wondering if you could share a little bit how, you and your wife, you're doing a lot of manifold activities in Krishna consciousness, and you share Krishna consciousness, you're
My
preaching
wife.
a lot.
Not me.
And so, in this way you're very exemplary grihastas, that you really, engage in Krishna consciousness so intensely and preach a lot. So how would you inspire others to also do that more, like, because everybody should do that, and it would be very nice if you could give some words on it. What is your inspiration?
I can only say what I'm doing as an outreach program, and this, you already know, Power Series, right? And it started as an experiment because I was selfish. I wanted to go deeper into subject matter of Bhagavad Gita, and I thought, this is a great way to force myself, because I cannot preach to others or try to engage them, give them Krishna consciousness, if I don't know anything about it, right? And then when I started to do this, I was following some templates, and this was very dry, and then, at least dry to me. And then I tried to, but how would I present this to anyone I meet, from my realizations? What do I understand from this? What is my everyday view? I'm not a preacher. I'm not, devotee living in a temple. I'm just a regular Joe going to work from 9 to 5, right? And then trying to give somebody access to Krishna consciousness. And when I started to speak in that way, that I'm, giving them Srila Prabhupada's teachings, but in simple words that my colleague from work would understand, I was just blown away by the reaction from them, because they were giving they received Krishna consciousness, and then reaction to that was so inspiring, because I could see Krishna speaking to me from them. And it was that changed everything for me. When I saw that it's not just me lecturing them, it's actually exchange, and they open up, and then they share with you things that are, we were talking, I was talking to one person, and he shared to me, we were talking about reincarnation, and he said to me, before I started to speak about reincarnation, I have everything prepared, and he said, you know what my son told me today in the morning? That he was a clownfish in his previous life. He was in Caribbean, and he was eaten by a shark, and now he's here. He just told me that this morning. And I'm just about to click a button to show him a video about reincarnation, and I'm like, blown away by, all this is just a small illustration, but reactions like that, where clearly Krishna is talking to you and says, yeah, he knows already about reincarnation, So you can simplify words. It doesn't need to be dry. It needs to be what you realize from it, right? And then, it just becomes magical to me. It's just it becomes intoxicating to the point that I need to remind myself every time I start with this simple outreach program that I should not become puffed up. I try to ask Krishna to speak through me because I have silly mind which sometimes goes in all kinds of directions, so that I don't confuse them. I just want to give them essence, but in my own words. That's all, right? And it becomes amazing. And I think all of you are doing the same thing. But I think this is what I learned also from Guru Gauranga Prabhu. He taught me a super valuable lesson about being a genuine person. Just be who you are. Add on top of that Krishna consciousness. Don't shy away of it. Own your mistakes. It's super valuable because you will inspire somebody else by your mistakes if you put Krishna consciousness on top of it. Don't try to become somebody else. Don't try to impress anyone. Srila Prabhupada was a wonderful example of that. Kadamba Swami said about him, you know what's impressive about Srila Prabhupada? He never wanted to impress anyone. Isn't it? So things like that. So all these things. So you are trying to reach to somebody else who doesn't have Krishna consciousness in his life. You need to prepare. You are doing this research of what you will say, and then at the beginning it's small amount, but more and more you are totally absorbed in collecting all this knowledge because you need to present it to somebody else. So you are going deeper. So I would invite anyone to try to do that. I know that you are all doing much more than I am, but it's actually a wonderful, wonderful thing. I don't know if that answers. Okay, then thank you very much for participating in this Katha. And Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.